All right, let's now turn to the high school football hazing case that has rocked the town of Sayreville and also sparked many questions beyond its borders. Authorities say that 7 members of the high school football team now facing criminal charges. Officials argue allegations of abuse went way beyond typical hazing here. Middlesex County prosecutor investigating claims from 4 members of the team. They include bullying, intimidation, even sexual assault. Some of the players made their first court appearance Tuesday. School superintendent canceled the football program for the season, and authorities are trying to determine just how pervasive this hazing was even in years past. Players could be treated as adults, and this move may provide some leverage to prosecutors to seek plea deals. And I want to bring in our legal panel on this. Jim Koussouris, criminal defense attorney in Manhattan, lecturing at New York Law School, visiting professor at the University of Birmingham in England. Doug Von Oist, founding partner of Carson Von Oist, focusing on corporate misconduct, and selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the country. Mayo Bartlett, attorney, former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit, the Westchester County DA's office. And look who decided to join us this week. Mark Furnish, gracing us with his presence.
Good to be back.
Yes, professor of Brooklyn Law, and he's also argued before the U.S. Supreme Court. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. Okay, there also, on a related level, guys, is a case in Pennsylvania. 10-year-old Pennsylvania boy facing criminal homicide charges in the death of a 90-year-old woman. And this kid right now is locked up in isolation at a correctional facility following a Saturday's incident. Say he killed the woman who
That's what you call an incident?
Yeah, who was cared for by his grandfather after she yelled at him to leave her room. And it was a brutal murder. I don't have to get details. But there's this question, and we can, this magic line, when is a kid and when is a kid an adult? Is it the crime that should basically decide it? Is it the age? Is it the acumen? Now, you're talking for the most part about 17-year-olds and 16-year-olds in the case of Sayreville, and the victims we believe to be universally freshmen, so figure 14 years of age or something close to that. The detail is pretty, if the allegations prove true, pretty horrific here. You guys have prosecuted cases before. How do you make that judgment? Is it all about leverage to seek a deal, or is it, oh, what they did was really messed up? 17 is close enough to 18. I'll consider them an adult. 10, that's still a kid. How do you figure it out?
Well, it should never be leveraged to get a deal. These are human lives. And when you exercise your authority and power as a prosecutor with that motive in mind, you're not doing the right thing. Let me be really clear. A 10-year-old is a kid. And that's an issue that has so much less to do with the criminal justice system and finding out just what happened with that particular child. But in this case, 17 and 18-year-olds, and the allegations that we haven't gone into, I mean, this is not hazing. These are criminal acts. These are horrific acts committed by young adults at a minimum.
But let me ask you, Jimmy, if this was Pop Warner football and these kids were 10 and they did the exact same thing to 8-year-olds on the team, would you still say this is horrific and what they did, whether they're 10 or 17, should be treated the same way?
It's a tough question to ask because that's not going to happen.
Right.
I mean, we're not talking about these allegations, and you're not going to have 10-year-olds playing on a baseball field with these types of allegations.
Okay, but we had a 10-year-old who literally killed a 9-year-old, and Doug, I guess the problem is, and you know the prosecutor's thinking about this, if they treat these 17-year-old kids as minors for what they did, the punishment's going to be probably pretty limited versus what a lot of people think it should be merited. How do you navigate that?
Well, we're talking about discretion in the system that's put there for a reason. And they're going to look at these cases factually. And they're going to see if the conduct, the things that were done, go above and beyond what a child should be doing. And if it crosses that line, and they say, no, now we're talking about conduct that should be treated criminally like an adult, they have the discretion to do it, and I assume they will.
See, it's a unique statutory system. The Pennsylvania system and the New Jersey system are virtually mirror images of each other in the opposite way. So there's no doubt that the kid in Pennsylvania, as Jimmy said, is going to ultimately be treated as a juvenile, but there's a mandatory state law in Pennsylvania that requires all offenders to be treated as adults in the first instance, and then an application will be made and undoubtedly will be granted to transfer the case to juvenile court. It's the exact opposite in New Jersey. All of them start out as juvenile offenders, then the prosecutor has discretion to bring the application based on myriad different factors, including the age. And remember, there's 7 different arrestees of different age groups in New Jersey, and then a judge has discretion to grant or deny it. So you've got offenders, alleged offenders in the Jersey case ranging in age from 15 all the way up to 17. These seniors, who allegedly are the ringleaders of this, who are very close to being adults, highly likely, right, that they'll be treated as adults. Much less so a 15-year-old who held the kid, the freshman down allegedly, or watched the doors. So it's state criminal justice laboratories consistent with our system of federalism.
Would you, Mayo, prefer it be more black and white? No, that wasn't a pun here. But no, would you prefer that it be, okay, 15. Anything you do before 15, automatically you're a kid. Anything over 15, there's a possibility of it. Because what Mark says is right. I believe he'll be right. That's how it will happen in Pennsylvania. But you guys know there's some cowboy DAs out there, prosecutors who want to be the tough guys, right? And this is a horrific case in Pennsylvania. I don't want to get into the details what that boy did to that 90-year-old woman here, but it wasn't just an accident how she died. But he's 10. My point is, reasonable people might say 10's a kid. You go to somebody else, they say, nope, crime's a crime, you're going to pay the punishment, the kid should be locked up and never see the light of day for the rest of his life. Do you like discretion in the law or no?
I think you have to have discretion in the law, and I think that when you're talking about children, it comes down to your mental capacity. So it comes down to your ability to understand what you're doing. It's basically uncontroverted that we are still developing well into our 20s, for instance. And I'm not necessarily saying that you have to afford people that protection into the 20s, but certainly I would say 18 should be a cutoff. And it doesn't mean that there's not a punishment that goes along with conduct, but to put a 10-year-old in a prison with adults is also, we also still do have a duty to that individual. So Charlie Manson, there's a duty to protect him. Just because he's convicted doesn't mean that
well,
now
he'd be in a juvenile facility till he was 18,
Absolutely.
and then he'd be transferred to an adult facility if that's what...
And depending on what we're talking about, there's also the possibility of having a civil confinement for young people, because where you can at least be therapeutic and help, because we're going to, if we get into a point where we start to just warehouse kids for conduct that they engaged in as children, you know, it's a slippery slope, and eventually that's all we're going to be doing. And I even beg to differ when you talk about Pop Warner. I'm quite sure if you had a magnifying glass and you were sitting there watching all those kids, you'd be amazed at what they do. And a lot of it comes down to what kids see, because it's so readily available on the internet that, you know, you don't need TV anymore. So kids are seeing things that their parents probably would never even have thought of, because it's just right there.
Do you think, and I know we're going to hit a break here, we come back to Sayreville, and you saw the community's reaction, or at least it was a divided community, I think it's still a divided community right now, that there will be an argument made that as bad as what the kids, if the allegations, if there's evidence to support it, that they did in that locker room, that, you know what, it's kids going too far, but it's part of the football thing, and they went too far. This is much different than if this happened, you know, in the middle of, you know, a back alley late one night. Do you think that argument in a community that seemingly, you know, showed initial support for the kids and thought that they shouldn't cancel, forget about the season, even a game, you know, that do they actually have an argument that'd be persuasive to jurors?
Well, I don't know if it's an argument that would persuade a jury, but it's clear. We were talking about it in the Peterson case, how if apparently it's okay to beat your kid in some places, and if you would have been tried there, be acquitted in a minute. I think that your community, the community here, you're going to find support, and you're going to find people who are more forgiving of their own. Whether it would sell to a jury elsewhere, doubtful.
And for my end, I know we're going to go to break, taking this out of the legal realm, good for that school superintendent to show the courage he did to pull the plug on the season. And if you don't think messages need to be sent on your own time, I suggest you look at some of those town hall meetings and some of the, let's say, displaced anger or misplaced anger on the part of the parents. Take a look on your own time.
How about
here.
the coaches? If they didn't know, they had to, must have had a duty to know.
We've all been in locker rooms. The idea that you would leave 60, 70 teenage boys alone to mete out their own judgment and justice in a locker room.
Insane.
Yes.
And the
Good
assistant
work,
coach is distributing steroids.
Good times. All right, coming up next here, speaking of football, former NFL players reach a multi-million-dollar lawsuit settlement with a league in a class action concussion lawsuit. The question is, who's really the winner and losers in this case? We'll get into that after this.